Hi, I'm Peter J. Shield. Welcome to my world of unexplained mysteries, Vegas style. We're here in the fabulous city of Las Vegas, and we take great pride in our association with one of America's most exciting Air Force establishments, Nellis Air Force Base, and home of the incredible Thunderbirds acrobatic team, or aerobatic to be more precise. It seems only natural, therefore, to devote one of my programs to the story of Flight 19, 5 Avenger bombers that mysteriously disappeared off the coast of Florida whilst on a training flight over what has become known as the mysterious Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is a stretch of the Atlantic Ocean bounded by a line from Florida to the islands of Bermuda, to Puerto Rico, and then back to Florida. It's one of the biggest mysteries of our time. Or is it? Is it really a mystery, would you believe? The name Bermuda Triangle was first used in an article written by Vincent H. Gaddis for Argosy magazine in 1946. Gaddis claimed that in this strange sea, a number of ships and planes had disappeared without explanation. He wasn't the first one to come to this conclusion either. In 1952, George X. Sands, in a report in Fate magazine, noted what seemed like an unusually large number of strange and inexplicable accidents in that region. In 1969, a John Wallace Spencer wrote a book called Limbo of the Lost, specifically about the Bermuda Triangle. And 2 years later, a feature documentary on the subject, The Devil's Triangle, was released. These, coupled with the bestseller The Bermuda Triangle, published in 1974, permanently registered the legend of the Devil's Triangle, although several books suggested that the disappearances were due to an intelligent, advanced race living in space or under the sea. The only problem was that the mystery was more fiction than fact. In one report I read in 1975, a librarian at Arizona State University named Larry Kusch decided to investigate the claims made by these articles and books. What he found, he published in his own book, entitled The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved. Kusch had carefully researched records that other writers had neglected. Often a triangle writer had noted a ship or a plane had disappeared in calm seas, when the record actually showed a raging storm had been in progress. Others said ships had mysteriously vanished when their remains had actually been found and the cause of their sinking explained. So much for poetic license. Lloyd's of London's accident records were scoured by the editor of Fate in 1975 and showed that the triangle was no more mysterious a part of the ocean than any other. U.S. Coast Guard records confirmed this, and since that time, no good arguments have ever been made to refute those statistics. Even though the Bermuda Triangle isn't a true mystery, this region of the sea certainly has had its share of marine tragedy, not least of which, and perhaps the best known one, was the story of Flight 19. The story of Flight 19 began on December the 5th, 1945. 5 Avenger bombers took off from the Naval Air Station at Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at 2:10 in the afternoon. It was a routine training mission, and the flight was composed of all students except for the commander, Lieutenant Charles Taylor. The squadron was to fly due east 56 miles to Hens and Chicken Shoals to conduct the practice bombing runs. When they had completed that objective, the flight plan called for them to fly to an additional 67 miles east, then turn north for 73 miles, and finally straight back to base, a distance of 120 miles. This course would take them on a triangular path over the sea. About an hour and a half after the flight had taken off, Lieutenant Robert Cox of Flight Control Center picked up a radio transmission from Taylor. Taylor indicated that his compasses were not working, but he believed himself to be somewhere over the Florida Keys. The Keys, of course, are a chain of islands south of Florida mainland. Cox instructed him to fly north, toward Miami, if Taylor was sure the flight was over the Keys. Today, planes have a number of ways that they can check their current position, including listening to a set of global positioning satellites in orbit around the Earth. It's almost impossible for a pilot to get lost if he has the right equipment, and uses it properly, of course. In 1945, however, planes flying over water had to depend on knowing their starting point, how long and fast they'd flown, and in what direction. If a pilot made a mistake with any of these figures, he was lost. Over the ocean, there's no landmarks to set him right. It was obvious that Taylor had become confused at some point in the flight. For some reason, Taylor apparently thought the flight had started out in the wrong direction and had headed south toward the Keys instead of east. This thought was to color his decision throughout the rest of the flight with deadly results. He was an experienced pilot, but hadn't spent a lot of time flying east toward the Bahamas, which was where he was going on that day. In order to try to get out of the Keys, Taylor took his flight north and further out to see the Avengers actually traveled. As time went on, snatches of transmissions were picked up on the mainland, indicating the other Flight 19 pilots were trying to get Taylor to change direction. It was obvious that Lieutenant Taylor was completely lost, somewhere over the mysterious Bermuda Triangle. Even his crew, or rather more importantly, some of his student pilots in other aircraft, realized what was going on. If we could just fly west, one student was heard to tell another, we would get home. He was right. By 4:45 p.m., it was obvious that Taylor was hopelessly lost. He was urged to turn control of the flight over to one of his students, but apparently he didn't. As it grew dark, communications deteriorated. From the few words that did get through, it was apparent Taylor was still flying north and east, the wrong directions. At 5:50 p.m., the ComGulf Sea Frontier Evaluation Center managed to get a fix on Flight 19's weakening signals. It was apparently east of New Samaria Beach, Florida by then. Communications were so poor that this information could not be passed to the lost planes. At 6:20, a Dumbo flying boat was dispatched to try and find Flight 19 and guide it back. Within the hour, 2 more planes, Martin Mariners, joined the search. Hope was rapidly fading for Flight 19 by then. The weather was getting rough, and the Avengers were very low on fuel. The last transmission from Flight 19 was heard at 7:04 p.m. Planes searched the area throughout the night and the next day. There were no signs of the Avengers, nor did the authorities really expect to find much. If, as believed, the Avengers crashed when their fuel was exhausted, they would have been sent to the bottom in seconds. by the 50-foot waves of the storm. As one of Taylor's colleagues noted, they didn't call those planes iron birds for nothing. They weighed 14,000 pounds empty, so when they ditched, they went down pretty fast. The two Martin mariners were supposed to rendezvous at the search zone. The second one, designated Training Flight 49, never showed up. What happened to the missing Martin mariner? Well, the crew of a ship in the area, the SS Gaines Mill, observed an explosion over the water shortly after the mariner had taken off. They headed towards the site, and there they saw what looked like oil and aeroplane debris floating on the surface. They were unable to recover anything because of the bad weather, but it seemed reasonable to assume that it was the remains of the mariner. The plane had a reputation as being a flying bomb, which would burst into flames from a single small spark. It's believed that one of the 22 men on board, unaware that the unpressurized cabin contained gas fumes, lit a cigarette, causing the explosion. So how did this tragedy turn into a Bermuda Triangle mystery? The Navy's original investigation concluded that the accident had been caused by Taylor's confusion. The saga of Flight 19 is probably the most repeated story about the Bermuda Triangle. The planes and their pilots even found their way into the science fiction film classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Where is Flight 19 now? Well, in 1991, 5 Avenger bombers were actually found in 600 feet of water off the coast of Florida by the salvage ship Deep Sea. Examination of the planes showed that they were not, however, Flight 19. So the final resting place of the planes and their crews is still the Bermuda Triangle's secret. During the past century, more than 50 ships and 20 aircraft sailed into oblivion in the area known as the Devil's Triangle, the Bermuda Triangle, the Hoodoo Sea, or a host of other names. Exactly what happened to the ships and aircraft is not known. Most disappeared without a trace. Few distress calls and little, if any, debris signaled their disappearance. The size of the triangle is dictated by whoever happens to be writing about it, and consequently, what ships and the number lost depends largely on which article you choose to read. Whatever the size or shape, there supposedly is some inexplicable force within it that causes ships and planes to vanish. Few have really dug into all aspects of this mystery, but many are content to attribute the loss of Flight 19 to some mysterious source, like UFOs. Michael McDonald did do some digging. In an article he wrote for the June 1973 edition of the Naval Aviation News, he suggested the most realistic answer to the loss of Flight 19 was quite simple, that after becoming lost, they ran out of gas. The PMB Mariner was specifically designed as a rescue plane with the ability to remain aloft for up to 24 hours. But the Mariners were nicknamed flying gas tanks by those who flew them. It was common for a pilot to search the crew before each flight for matches or cigarette lighters, because the gas fumes often were present. After this mariner disappeared, the Navy soon grounded all the others. Welcome back. Another mysterious disappearance that has baffled Bermuda Triangle researchers is that of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, bound for Norfolk, Virginia from Beaumont, Texas. The tanker was last heard from on February the 3rd, 1963, when she routinely radioed her position. The message placed her near Key West in the Florida Straits. 3 days later, Coast Guard searchers found a solitary life jacket bobbing in a calm sea 40 miles southwest of the tanker's last known position. No other sign of the missing tanker or her 39-man crew has ever been found. The absence of bodies might be explained by the fact that the waters are infested with sharks and barracuda. As for the tanker, she was carrying 15,000 long tons of molten sulfur contained in 4 metal tanks, each heated to 275 degrees Fahrenheit by a network of coils connected to 2 boilers. No one knows for sure whether she blew up, but it is a possibility. If gas escaped from the tanks and poisoned the crew, the radio officer may have not had time to send a distress call before being overcome. The slightest spark could have set off the leaking sulfur, and it went boom in an instant. Writing in the Seamen's Church Institute of New York magazine, The Lookout, Paul Brock said that officers on a Honduras-flagged banana boat reported to the Coast Guard that their freighter ran into a strong odor 50 miles off Cape Santa Antonia, the western tip of Cuba, just before dawn on February the 3rd. The odor was acid. Brooks speculates that they could have smelt the fumes coming from the Sulphur Queen, floating somewhere over the horizon, her dead crew and her cargo blazing. One of the most celebrated stories of the Devil Triangle victims is that of the U.S. Cyclops, which disappeared in March of 1918. In his television program, Richard Winner indicated the captain of the Cyclops was rather eccentric. He was reputedly fond of pacing the quarterdeck wearing a hat and a cane and his underwear. Prior to Cyclops' disappearance, there was a minor mutiny by some members of the crew, which was promptly squelched by the captain, and the perpetrators were sent below in irons. None of this really offers a clue to what happened to the collier Cyclops, but it suggests something other than a mysterious force might have led to her doom. Another story concerns the loss of the nuclear submarine USS Scorpion in the Devil's Triangle. It's impossible to even with the farthest imagination stretch the region of the triangle to include the position of the lost sub. Truth is, Scorpion was found by the MSC oceanographic ship, the U.S. Mizar, about 400 miles southwest of the Azores, nowhere near the Devil's Triangle. Its loss was attributed to mechanical failure and not some demonic dissonance of the deep. There are literally thousands of cases of lost ships ever since primitive man dug a canoe out of the trunk of a tree and set it in the water. Why all this emphasis on the Devil's Triangle? Well, it's difficult to say. It would seem that historically, wherever man was unable to explain the nature of the world around him, the problems he faced were said to be caused by the gods, by demons, by monsters, and more recently, extraterrestrial invaders. Even before Columbus set sail and found the Americas, it was believed that the world was flat, and if you sailed too far west, you would fall off the edge. That reasoning certainly prevails concerning the Devil's Triangle. since not enough scientific research has been done to explain the phenomena associated with the area. Imagination, therefore, takes over. UFOs, mysterious rays from the sun to the lost continent of Atlantis, giant sea monsters, and supernatural beings are linked to the mysterious disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. I'm Peter J. Shield. Thanks for watching.